Hi, everyone. Welcome to Chargeback X. We have our second day today. We're recording this session. You will be able to ask questions in the Q&A or in the chat after the session. We're going to be talking about winning the chargeback battle, strategic insights from acquirers and networks. And we're super excited about this day. You can look on the website and see the sessions for today. This first session has Katie Steele, Vice President of Security Solutions at MasterCard. She has nearly 2 decades of experience in fraud strategy and risk management, including leadership roles at Bank of America, and she now helps shape MasterCard's global approach to fraud prevention and security. We have Ludovic Houry, Managing Director at JP Morgan, leading merchant services across EMEA and APAC, as well as the segment for large clients. And he has driven strategy and innovation at major payments organizations, including American Express and Ingenico. And our very own Ronen Ben-Ami, Chief Risk Officer and co-founder at Just, who is our Chief Risk Officer. But before that, he led merchant risk and chargebacks at Simplex. We're super excited about this day. We've had 700 registrants, hundreds of participants yesterday, and we expect the same for today. Ronen, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Roni. Hi, everyone. We're super excited about the second day of Chargeback X after such a exciting day yesterday. And I'm specifically excited for this session. I was just saying right before to both Katie and Ludovic, having the opportunity to have both MasterCard and Chase Payment Tech along with me on this panel is just a great opportunity. And thank you both for joining me. I know I have a lot of questions. I'm sure the audience has a lot of questions. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We're really going to dive into chargebacks for merchants in regards to trends, the do's and don'ts, hearing tips from the network, and major acquirer in the ecosystem is just a great opportunity. So before I dive into all the questions, Katie, I'd love to let you start, introduce yourself to everybody here.
Sure, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Katie Steele, I am with MasterCard, and I'm in the security solutions team as a solutions engineer, working across the various verticals of all of our solutions product, security products, consulting, services, trying to pull them all together. And prior to my 3 years in this role, I was working in the consulting arm of MasterCard as a fraud and chargeback consultant for both issuers and merchants.
Amazing. I know you're going to have a lot to provide today. Ludovic, I'm so happy you're here. Can you introduce yourself to everyone?
Yes, thank you for having me. First of all, I'm very happy to be here with you. It was not natural for me to be invited to such a expertise group because I consider myself as a professional of merchant acquiring. I've been in merchant acquiring for more than 3 decades, indeed working for companies like American Express, First Data, and Ingenico. And now, since 3 years, I've been leading the merchant services effort at JP Morgan for Europe, APAC, but also with a large focus on the key accounts, the large key accounts. You know, to be here for an acquirer is very important because, in fact, a chargeback is a dysfunction for us. It's a kind of defeat. You know, we are in this business to make sure that transactions go through, and merchants are happy about the sale they have been doing. The consumers are happy about the goods or services they bought. And everything goes well. When there is a chargeback, something went wrong, and we need to be there to serve our clients the best we can to deal with the situation. And I must say, to finish this intro, that's why it's so important for me to discuss this. In this ecosystem, we we benefit from the fact that the schemes have created rules, and those are guidance that is helping the whole ecosystem to deal with it. And for several years now, the regulators in the different geographies have also looked at that to square and to manage this for the best of everyone, the consumer on one side and the merchant on the other side. So it's a fascinating topic. Invisible in a way, but fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to explain it. It is something be kind of in a way invisible, and but not, because it's there, it's painful, but it's kind of, I always say it's swept under the rug in a lot of ways, which is why we're here to talk about it. Katie, I'm going to start with you. You know, there's so many trends in this space and so many changes happening. We've been talking about it on the first day, and we're going to be talking a lot about it in many sessions today. What would you say you're currently seeing as the top trends across different industries right now around chargebacks?
Yeah, I wasn't able to attend all the sessions yesterday, but I do know that Sarah from the first morning session did touch on most of the top trends, first party fraud for sure. And of course, subscription confusion, driving a lot of the disputes, whether valid or not. And then I'd also want to mention scam fraud is certainly up year over year when the consumer themselves have fallen for a scam, whether it started as a phish or, someone saying they'll act on their behalf, what have you. So I would say that those are the three biggest drivers right now.
Yeah, that's so great. It's such a great, different group of points you mentioned here. And I'll even focus on the last point, because I was just at MasterCard's RiskX conference last week in Rome, and that was a big topic. We were talking about scam fraud and the fact that if it's a consumer that's been scammed, the chargeback process wasn't even built for those type of scenarios, but it's being used for those scenarios. And you're seeing a lot of chargebacks being posted because of scams, but it's not actually supposed to be a legitimate chargeback or to be posted in the first place.
Right, but from the consumer point of view, they had fraud take place to them, right? So that's what they're communicating back to their issuer. So the issuer hears that, and the issuer says, "Okay, fraud chargeback," right? Not all claim intake is very thorough and actually draws out, "Oh, you provided your card number. Oh, you participated in this transaction," right? So, customer says, "I've been a victim." The issuer is always going to take their back, especially, because they are their customer, but also a lot of regulations kind of dictate that they need to.
Exactly. It's such a tough point to deal with in the proper manner. What about you, Ludovic? What are you seeing on your end in regards to trends around chargebacks?
So I would say, first of all, the number of chargebacks are rising. It's not stopping, despite everything the whole ecosystem is trying to avoid chargeback. It's still growing. The number of chargebacks are growing. Second thing to mention, in my opinion, is the fact that, and that's my tendency, is to focus on e-commerce, online transactions, as opposed to in-store transactions. And the third element, which is a bit counterintuitive, friendly fraud are a large cause of chargeback too. It's not only a legitimate fraud. It's a wrong expression. It's not only a fraud, but a legitimate transaction could become a chargeback. And this is something we all have to deal with, because this is distorting the reality of the chargeback situation of merchants. So growing number of chargeback, e-commerce, and friendly fraud.
Great points. And you both hit on that point of friendly fraud, first party misuse. We're seeing large numbers in many different industries right now. Katie, is there specific industries you're seeing major changes around chargeback activity at the moment?
For sure. So in terms of like industry codes or categories, digital goods is experiencing high volumes in both fraud and non-fraud disputes. And then travel disputes are up over 800% in recent years.
Wow.
So that a lot of times is the, confusion by the consumer, not true fraud. And then lastly, subscription disputes are up 59% year over year.
Wow. The travel number is very interesting because we're seeing it with our data as well. It really seems like since COVID, it's become this mainstream form of dealing with your issue in travel because it was a direction a lot of individuals took during the COVID period. Do you see that in your numbers in different areas of the world that the numbers are going up in travel because of that?
Certainly, I mean, it's certainly easier in many cases for the consumer to dispute with their issuer than try to, get refunds on travel, for one, but also the confusion, right? We have a lot more, travel agencies or third parties that do the booking that simply confuse the customer when they see things on statements.
Yeah. And what about you mentioned about subscription is up. Subscription always seemed to be a high area of chargebacks. Is there a specific reason why we're seeing more at the moment for subscription?
I think the ecosystem, because it's, allowed it, it's almost like training poor behavior of the consumer, right? So, when they do get a refund, whether it's through the merchant or the chargeback process, it's training their behavior that they can essentially do that in the future.
Yeah.
It's not right, and that's why, a lot of the, first party trust programs and stuff have been put into place. And of
Yeah.
course, consumer clarity on the Ethica side, things like that.
Makes sense. Ludovic, are you seeing similar numbers on your end in regards to subscription traffic, seeing more chargebacks, travel? Would you say any other area of the business as well?
So specifically on subscriptions, definitely yes. There is a pattern that is really linked to subscriptions. In fact, two elements are coming to my mind around subscription. Number one, when the amount, the value of the payment of the subscription is very low, I think there is an arbitration at the merchant side to decide, well, the value of the transaction is so small, why should I fight this war against the consumer? It will cost me so much more. So there is this tendency, and I think it's maybe more in North America, people tend to know what are the rules of the games around subscription in terms of consumers. The other type of subscription issues we might see in this chargeback area is the fact that many business models are based on subscriptions with a tendency to be willing to be forgotten by the consumer or by the client. So and sometimes they are very successfully getting forgotten by the consumer. So when the consumer wake up one day and say, "Oh my God, I forgot I had that subscription for the last 3 years. I want to charge back it all," and then it becomes a crisis. So those are the two patterns I see: low value, and then subscriptions that are kind of hidden in the life of the consumers.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And now that we spoke about the trends, let's talk a little bit about actions you guys think are major actions merchants can take. So let's talk about prevention now. Katie, do you think there are major actions merchants can take to prevent disputes from happening in the first place? Because to be honest, we could stop the dispute from happening in the first place, you're in a better off situation. So what are you seeing are the best actions they could take?
Yeah, I mean, to prevent disputes altogether, I'd say there's 3 major layers of effort merchants can deploy. So first, do your part in the fraud prevention, right? Such as like participating in AVS and CVC checks, 3DS, monitoring for red flags such as like address mismatches. And then I know we're going to get to this part later in the day, but also arm yourself with AI detection tools. So again, first, fraud prevention on your part just as much as the issuer's part. Second, clarify the billing descriptors, because a lot of, consumer surveys out there do indicate that they just didn't understand what the transaction was. So either do this through naming in the auth or clearing on the statement, or through, at the very least, through participating in network tools such as like Ethica Clarity as mentioned. And then lastly, optimizing your customer support for cancellations and refunds. We have studies that have shown 84% of consumers find chargebacks easier than merchant refund processes.
Yeah.
Now, all of that was to reduce cardholders from disputing altogether. But once they have, tools like Ethica alerts, can be leveraged to avoid the lengthy and potentially expensive chargeback battles.
Great points. And yeah, I really think that's a huge thing we always say to merchants is if you have a good end user flow, good terms and conditions, good customer support, you're going to decrease a lot of those what we call legitimate chargebacks. Your consumers are making legitimate claims, and then what you're left with is that friendly fraud, first party misuse. If Ludovic, if we specifically focus on the fraud side, Katie mentioned some of the points on how to deal with fraud. How would you say is the best way to defend, to prevent fraud disputes and also deal with those fraud disputes when they come in?
So you can, as mentioned, using a fraud detection tool before authorization can be a necessity, just to know where we stand. And then to use all the tools that are available. And the tools are many at the moment. We mentioned 3D Secure. In Europe, it became almost mandatory to use 3D Secure, which is not necessarily a curse. Many merchants think 3D Secure is a transaction killer because it gets the conversion of the sale so painful in a way because it creates a lot of friction. But there are ways to mitigate that. And on top, if the job of fraud detection is well prepared, there are a series of exemptions that are possible. So the utilization of the system at full speed could ease the fact that some tools are difficult for the transaction. I would say the other elements have been mentioned. It's about we've got tokenization that is rising by the day, but of course, once the PAN is going to disappear, the card details are not going to be in the open anymore. It's going to be more and more difficult to generate a fraud. So I would say focus on the tools that are available and try to find strategies to use the tools so the transaction is not impacted in terms of the quality.
Great, thank you so much. And Katie, I'm sure you guys are seeing so many different merchants in your systems today. Are there specific characteristics that you see that are setting those top performing merchants apart from the ones that struggle more in regards to actually handling their chargebacks to prevent them, but also deal with them when they come in and try to recover the funds from the chargebacks?
Yeah, so I think that's two very different sections, right? There's the ones that just have less chargebacks on them, right? And that's probably because of all the clarity around the transaction name, the amount being right, the clearing being timely, right? Like, this following the guidelines. But in terms of actual win rates, successfully pushing back on issuers, that's coming down to, they're providing robust documentation and representment materials. The use of automated repre tools to dispute illegitimate claims. using data-driven strategy. I mean, I think someone yesterday in a session mentioned they're going to treat different claims differently, right? Whether it's low dollar, I think the comparison was subscription versus travel. So use data to determine, is this worth it, et cetera, and how much success do we have winning these in the past, that sort of thing. And honestly, I don't know if this is what I've seen from these top performing merchants, but absolutely a best practice is to treat chargeback improvement as fluid, right? This is not a one-time fix. A year from now, it's not, well, Katie and Ludovic said, because that may not be impactful next year, right? So treat it as fluid, follow the data, and provide as much data in the materials as you can.
Yeah, I love that last point you mentioned around that it's not a one and done. It's something we always are talking about is doesn't matter how great your solution is today, is it going to be relevant tomorrow? The rules are changing. Maybe there's specific subsections that you're struggling with and it's going to continue to be a struggle if you don't figure out a way to test and improve those areas. So it's definitely something that constantly needs to be updated and improved on. I love you mentioned that point, and then your last point about data is so key. So you have to have the right data. Are there specific data points, Katie, that you're seeing are usually the data points that merchants are usually missing that are like the reason why they're falling short on fighting their cases?
Yeah, I think when it comes to in the chargeback life cycle, say the dispute has already taken place, for fraud chargebacks, obviously it's the burden of proof, right? So merchants need to prove the transaction was valid because, as I mentioned before, issuers are going to default to protecting their cardholders unless the evidence is airtight. And of course, this could include like proof of delivery, IP addresses, customer communication records, right? So just providing all of that, helps state your case. The other piece, I don't know if we'd call it a data or data element, but I think about automation bias. So what I mean by that is, issuers are also automating their chargeback process to review disputes, to process first chargebacks, even to send through to pre-arb. So any poor formatting or missing context can lead to like an automatic chargeback, right? So, again, go down to the network guidelines, make sure you're following the rules on formatting and included context. Same goes with the friendly fraud defense. This is a substantial amount of chargebacks are friendly fraud, as we talked about. So without strong evidence, merchants are going to lose that revenue. And as I mentioned, train the customers to abuse that system. So all those data points were more about once a dispute has taken place. But as for prior to a chargeback, remember that like recurring billing or add-ons like hotel minibar, for example, merchants are required to obtain incremental or reauthorization. So failing to do that violates our network rules and could lose the chargeback because of that. And then there's other data elements you want to look for, provide. So like the TLID, transaction lifecycle identifier, valid authorization codes, accurate transaction amounts, timely settlement. Those are all just as important.
Great points. And I love that point around making sure your end user flow is compliant with the card scheme rules. If your end user flow isn't compliant, and especially, there's specific rules around subscription of what you need to show that there's going to be a recurring billing transaction. It'll decrease the chargebacks that come in the first place, and you'll have stronger evidence when the chargeback does come in that you as the merchant, did everything according to the rules of the card schemes. Ludovic, if I specifically focus on non-fraud disputes, what do you see as the best items for merchants to focus on to handle these types of disputes?
So I would say to use all the tools that are available before the the dispute gets real. Anything that is pre-dispute, that is available, let's use it. And that makes me think, just to rebound on what Cathy just said, I was really learning from Cathy's experience, but it's true that the rules are so important. And the challenge with the rules is that they're evolving, as you rightly said. At merchant side, different staffs are happening to deal with that, and not all of them have got the same level of knowledge. So one element that we try to tell our clients is really to try to educate staff all the time, maintain a lot of education, because that's going to save a lot of money. An element that is key also is speed. So when something is going wrong in the transaction, something dysfunctional, speed to react, speed to intervene with all the materials and the understanding of the situation is a key element. You want to prevent a problem to become a chargeback. If you succeed in this, it's a big win for everybody, for the merchant, for the consumer, for the whole ecosystem. It's good, and everybody's going to save money. So speed, education, pre-dispute tools, and of course data collection. I mean, you've talked a lot about data collection, but it could go one step further to what was said with device IDs, for example, or IP address. I was not there. It was not me. Yes, you were. It was your phone. There are ways to. The more we get details about the way a transaction took place, the better it is to deal with it in the ecosystem. And it's true that, as Cathy said, with more and more automated solutions, as soon as you find something that is different from just the classic elements, you can win. You can win because you have added something that is valuable in the dispute process.
Great points, Ludovic, and I'll focus on one of the things that you mentioned is really the actions to take to prevent the chargebacks happening in the first place. Are there specific mistakes you're seeing by merchants that may be causing the chargebacks, and if they didn't do these actions, they could prevent the chargebacks from happening in the first place from the merchants you're working with?
So, there's no rocket science here. It's really about the delivery, what we said earlier, the customer service, the ability to inform the consumer something is happening, to communicate with the consumer all the time about, you've got a subscription amount that is coming up in 1 week, be ready. And it goes against what I said at the beginning. Some merchants, and that's why we've got so many problems with subscriptions, don't want necessarily the consumer to remember there was a subscription. So, but transparency is the key element here to prevent all this from happening.
Yeah, I love that last point you mentioned. In the end, you want to be compliant with the rules and provide the updates so they know the next transaction's coming in. But also at the same time, you want to increase your transaction volumes. But in the end, if increasing your transaction volumes mean that a chargeback's going to come in later, you got to really see what is the best actions to make and in order to stay compliant and deal with those chargebacks when they come in. And a lot of industry rule changes are happening. Katie, I know MasterCard is making a lot of changes and has made a lot of changes. Is it because online commerce is changing so much that these rules are changing? Why, or is it other reasons? Why do you see so many changes in the industry today?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you said. It's due to a combination of changes in fraud types, changes in dispute styles and types, operational efficiencies, and of course, depending on the region, regulatory pressure, right? So ultimately, as Ludo said, chargebacks are escalating, not just growing. Global volumes projected to climb about 24% in the next 3 years. And since CNP, card not present, dominates the digital commerce at over 60% of that, it makes the whole ecosystem more vulnerable to disputes and fraud. And simply like legacy systems and rules just can't keep up. So the bottom line is, these changes reflect the fundamental shift in card usage, whether valid or not, and how disputes are managed. So it's going from reactive to proactive, from a merchant level view to portfolio level accountability, and from manual to automated. So, a lot of the rules just are to reflect and combat the changing ecosystem.
Great points. And with all these changes happening, do you have any tips for merchants in regards to what is the best way for them to stay up to date with all these rule changes? How do they tackle this? Because it's a job in itself to just deal with changing your systems and making sure you know what to change even.
Well, when it comes to networks, of course, our bulletins are the best way to understand the requirements and changes. But in general, like how you adapt your rules or why we're adapting rules and the nature of the online commerce, honestly, our push is toward the pre-dispute resolution, right? So by participating in network tools like Ethica, such as like the consumer clarity, providing digital receipts, a lot of times this can resolve a dispute from a cardholder before it actually becomes a live claim. Many of the same data elements used for compelling evidence in a chargeback or in a second presentment, can be provided up front, allowing the cardholder and issuer to avoid the dispute altogether. And that's what our push is toward.
Definitely. Ludovic, go ahead, Ludovic, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, but I think what we are discussing now is essential, and I feel as an acquirer, as a merchant acquirer, a huge responsibility to participate or to lead even the education of our clients about those rules and to constantly evolving rules. Actually, in most cases for their benefit, and probably merchant acquirers, we are not doing the best job in many cases. We need to get better. But I would like merchants to know that there is a rising consciousness of the importance of this. This is part of the transaction life cycle, and we need to pay huge attention to this. We said it was an invisible part of the business, but it can become deadly visible, in fact, to the business if we don't pay attention. So really, I would encourage merchants to go to their acquirer and request, if the acquirers are not volunteering educations on that. It can be a dialogue. I would be very happy to get kickbacks from the merchants to say, you're not doing a good job, help us more to understand more, what should we do. Communication is very important in every direction, and we will help the merchants. We can even cooperate with Kathy's team sometimes to go to merchants together when there is a problem. All of this is possible. So I would say the ecosystem needs to rise up the level of communication to get better together.
Great points. And Ludovic, something that you mentioned to me earlier when we were discussing that's interesting, and we discussed it slightly here, is the whole differences that we're seeing between, let's say, the US and the EU in chargebacks. Katie, you mentioned the regulation differences in different areas, and that could change rules. Well, Ludovic, maybe you could touch a little bit on some of the differences that you guys are seeing between the US traffic as opposed to the EU traffic.
So the rules themselves are not, the scheme rules are not dissimilar between Europe and North America. They are the same. What may differ are the regulations around the fraud management. That's a possibility, and that might impact the level of dispute and chargebacks we are facing. But what I was telling you earlier on is also about culture. There is a major cultural difference between Europeans and North Americans, I would say. I think UK is kind of close to the US in that space, but I know because I've been to the US many times in business meetings, I know that US consumers are very conscious of their rights. And that makes a huge difference. They know that why they can charge back, when they can charge back, they are very conscious. Europeans are not. So and European banks or acquirers are not volunteering too much to educate their consumers. So that makes the experience very different between Europe and North America, in the sense that I feel at least that in America it's for the consumers and the merchants, it's a normal process. Can be painful sometimes, but they accept the way it is. Everybody plays his role. In Europe, consumers feel it very painfully because they don't know it. So when they get to the point where they have got to charge back a transaction because they did not get the good, they were not delivered, and they are kind of panicking. They don't. It's very painful, and that makes very different experience for the ecosystem.
Great points, and definitely very interesting how the social norms make such an impact on the differences. Katie, with all the different changes happening in the industry today and the different rule changes, would you say that today merchants should be fighting all of their chargebacks, a portion of their chargebacks? What is your insights around that?
I love this question because my answer emphatically is certainly not. They should not be fighting all chargebacks. Instead, merchants should exercise strategic dispute management, where each case is evaluated based on its potential for recovery, cost, and long-term impact, right? And when I say every case should be evaluated, much of this can be done through automated rule logic. I'm not asking an individual to review each. We talked about minimum thresholds, types of transactions, even reason codes. They should filter through different rule logic, but certainly not. By fighting every chargeback, you're going to see higher costs. You're going to see lower win rates and the risk of a negative relationship with issuers, which could downstream impact, even approval rates.
Yeah, great points, Katie, and I love your answer because it kind of lifts us for what we're going to be talking about later on, where Orly, our product manager, is going to be speaking. Is exactly on that. How do you decide which disputes to actually handle, and building a smart tool that can make that decision of deciding what is your chances of winning the case? What's my costs involved in it? So there's all these costs. Many times these fees about disputing a case, the merchants aren't aware of the costs that can be involved.
And Ronan, what the last part of Cathy's comment is also very important. It's not only the money and the cost, it's the impact post the event it could have on the performance of this specific merchant with this specific acquirer. Transactions success could go down because of this. This is a critical element. This
Definitely.
is a lot of money for the merchants.
Right. Great points. So let's go into another direction now. Technology is such a big point of discussion today, especially since agentic AI has come out this past year. Ludovic, what do you think about agentic AI in dispute management? Is it at a place where it can be relevant for dispute management today?
So we are really at the beginning of the history of agentic AI, agentic commerce. Even the rules are not yet super clear. But what one can think of is that when agentic AI commerce is going to take place, it's going to take place with full knowledge of the rules and the system, and therefore optimize every transactions the way to do it properly, first of all, to prevent that from happening even before the transaction takes place, but also to prepare the potential dispute by assembling all the elements of the dispute almost robotically, automatically, in a very systematic way. So my gut feel, and I think it's the gut feel of a lot of people in the industry, is that it could improve, in fact, the dispute results with the right technology in place, in terms of speed, cost, and efficiency. Replacing the human consumer with an agent consumer should lead to less chargebacks.
Interesting opinion on the point. I'd love to hear, Katie, your view too. If we just focus specifically on agentic commerce in the world of agentic AI, maybe give a few points on what your view is on what that looks like for MasterCard in the future. And I think Ludovic's point is really interesting. Will it increase chargebacks or will it decrease chargebacks? Because that's the discussion in the market. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I have my own personal opinion, but I'd love to hear your opinion on the point.
Yeah, so I was actually it was refreshing to hear that opinion, because wouldn't that be nice? I love the idea and the optimism there, because he's not wrong, right? They're going to know the rules. They're going to know what data elements have to be fulfilled on each transaction, right? So for that reason, he's not wrong, you know, like less disputes from just inaccuracies and formatting, right? However, some of us pessimists in the industry are feeling that it may really drive additional claims, you know, just because of misinterpreted intent, right? The customer did work with an agent to for their purchase, but the intent was misunderstood due to, you know, language or what have I said violet shirt instead of purple shirt, right? These are things that could really drive additional non-fraud disputes. And then there's going to be like the over personalization. AI is just continuing to learn. So purchases based on inferred preferences might be disputed or disagreed, right? Like that's not what I meant. We are anticipating a rise in the phrase is the next best purchase. So like when a preferred item is out of stock, agents will choose the next best alternative based on programmed criteria. And this can lead to mismatches in sizes, features, or packaging, right? Especially categories like apparel, household goods. Then there's one, I hope I'm not scaring anyone who hasn't maybe heard this term yet, but agent hallucination is a term in the industry now. So agent hallucination refers to, think about AI. They can show you anything in your imagination, right? So if you do say, you know, purple shirt, it may show you an image of a purple shirt that looks just perfect for you, but that merchant doesn't actually carry it. Right. So, I mean, ideally, they're going to follow the rules. They're going to be registered agents that are required to follow the network guidelines. But there's going to be ghost agents out there, and it's everyone's duty in the ecosystem to try to detect them and identify them and block them. But yeah, we actually believe that there's going to be a rise due to agentic commerce.
Very interesting and great insights from both of you on this topic. I wonder, do you see, Katie, a way that merchants can start preparing, any practical steps that they could take right now? Because on one side it's so new, it already exists today. We'll even be showing it later on in the session later today, but it's still it's not mainstream. It's at the initial stages. What should merchants be doing today to start preparing for this agentic commerce phase in the payment space?
So before even addressing that question, I want to reiterate what you just said. It's not that common. It's new, but at the end of the day, AI is already here, right? So like, I just want to throw some more scary numbers at everyone. Just in a weekly count, users that are using OpenAI is up to 700 million. Again, weekly, and that's up from 500 million at the end of March. So think about that acceleration rate in just mere months. And over half of consumers have replaced traditional search engines with Gen AI tools for product recommendations. And studies have actually shown that 68% of consumers are comfortable letting AI do the checkout. That's up from 34% 6 months ago. So it's doubled in 6 months of consumers who are saying, once it's live, once it's available to me, heck yeah, I'm going to use it. So now I'll get to your question about the practical steps merchants can take. I realize I am talking to the chargeback teams, but when it comes to agentic, merchants nor any entity affected should work in silos. And so what I mean by this is both the upfront detection and dispute resolution need to gear up to be ready. So the best practices is only work with registered agents and use tools to identify and distinguish them from the bad bots. Because think about it, this industry has spent billions, maybe trillions of dollars on finally getting good at detecting bots. But now we have to be okay with some of them, right? And so distinguishing which ones are the good, which ones are registered with the networks, because if they are registered, then they're, need to follow our rules, that sort of thing. And honestly, just be prepared to record the intent and at checkout, validate against intent, right? So the intent says customer wanted a bicycle is what is being purchased at checkout, right? And then ultimately adhere to the guidelines and best practices that are forthcoming from the networks. I promise you, we have teams upon teams of people, even preparing merchant best practices documents right now.
Those are great insights. Ludovic, are you seeing anything from your end that merchants should be doing to prepare in addition to what Katie mentioned? It's just a really interesting period in the industry.
No, the only thing I could mention here is that it's very active in the domain of very large merchants. Everybody's preparing, and we are working with as many of them to accompany as much as we can. But we are really partnering with MasterCard or the other schemes to deal with that the best way we can. We are kind of in the middle between the merchant and the schemes, and for us it's going to be very important to have clear guidance from the schemes on the rules, and we will educate the market the best way as possible according to those rules. Let's wait and see.
Amazing.
And when Ludo mentioned the large merchants already preparing, some of the best practices we're seeing already by the large merchants that are assisting with piloting all of this is, they're structuring product data and AI discovery, which could even mean alternate websites, right? Katie Steele, the human, goes to your website and sees this. This is how I filter the clothing I want to look at and what have you. But the agent potentially should be able to go to like an agent only web-based model of your catalog, more with descriptive words and things like that that can, you know, help them match up to the intent. So we're seeing that as a best practice by some of these larger merchants that are gearing up. And then, of course, just updating your dispute workflows to identify it was an agent-driven transaction. So you may want to treat that differently and, of course, record it for your data. So sorry to re-add.
No, those are great points, and I see that. To be honest, I have a whole nother hour I can continue going with you guys, but I also want to open it up for a few questions, and we're running out of time. So maybe I'll let you guys, each of you, just give one final takeaway, because we talked about so many different things in this discussion. It was great. Can you give one takeaway if you wanted somebody to take one point away from this conversation today? What would you leave the audience with?
If this is for me, I would say good quality data. Good quality data is extremely important, as the chargeback rules are based on data and not feelings. You know, acquirers and merchants should always concentrate on the power of the data and scrutinize what they are sending as compelling evidence. And even more effective, the data merchants provide through pre-dispute solutions, as we were talking about. So I would say that's my answer.
I fully agree with what Kathy just said, and it's very important. I would add only maybe two things: the speed of reaction, and let's talk between the merchants and the acquirers. Let's maintain knowledge of the rules. Let's challenge each other genuinely to get a better ecosystem collectively. I think we are all together into this. We are not enemies. We are together in this.
Great points. So we'll leave time for at least one or two questions from the audience. I see there's a good question for you, Katie, here. It's something you mentioned. Can you please elaborate on the issuer side automation? Do they have automation to read merchants' evidence?
They do, yeah. A lot of the, you know, more progressive issuers moved to automation early on for first chargeback. So, you know, just recognizing that it's a fraud dispute, it's not 3DS, it's, you know, couple, you know, this dollar amount. So they're just going to process the 4837 chargeback code saying, you know, invalid, this is fraud, right? So first chargeback automations existed for a while, but absolutely, as they incorporate AI into their automation, they are absolutely reading. I mean, it could be as simple as, did a document come in, yes or no? If no, I'm pushing back. Is the document in English, yes or no? If not, I'm pushing back, right? There's going to be a lot of the simple basics that read the materials. But yes, they definitely have automation for even the...
I see there is a question specifically for me about what I said on the UK. I'd like to say that the UK rules are not dissimilar from the European rules or even the US rules. All I said, it's about the social habits, the culture in the UK, which means that the UK consumers, I feel, is closer to the US consumer in terms of education and knowledge about the chargeback system versus the mainland Europe consumer, which is less knowledgeable about the possibilities.
Great clarification. I think we're going to end there. There's so much that was discussed in this conversation. I'd love to continue this conversation. I'm sure others would as well. Thank you so much, Ludovic and Katie, for participating in this panel. Super valuable. I learned new things here today. And thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.